Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about algorithm and flowchart. So now let's define what is programming algorithm. Algorithm is a set of instructions or rules to be followed by a computer program. It includes input, process, and output depending on the problem to be solved. Another definition of algorithm: it is a finite set of precise instructions for performing a computation or for solving a problem. When we say finite, it means it is countable. Okay, the number of steps of the algorithm must be countable. Okay, it will end at certain point. It will end. Okay, a program is one type of algorithm. Directions to somebody's house is also an algorithm. A recipe for cooking a cake is an algorithm. The steps to compute the cosine of 90 degrees is also an algorithm. So basically, when we say algorithm, it is just a sequence or series of steps, step-by-step procedures used for solving problems. Okay, here are the characteristics of algorithm. So number one, input. Okay, these are the things that your algorithm takes in. So input, your algorithm should have an input. Next, we have output, what the algorithm produces as output or result. Okay, after the process, we are expecting for an output. Definiteness, the steps are defined precisely because algorithms are meant to be followed, to be executed. Okay, so it should be defined precisely. Correctness should produce the correct output. Okay, finiteness, the steps required should be finite. Okay, then we have effectiveness. Make sure the problem is solved. After you execute the algorithms, make sure you obtained the result that you wanted. Okay, efficiency. In less time, the result is obtained. And of course, generality. The algorithm should be applicable to all problems of similar form. Now let's define what is a variable. In mathematics, when we say variables, variables are letters that can represent any number. While in programming, when we talk about variables, these are letters or words that serve as a temporary storage that can represent any value. Okay? Remember, in naming a variable, it should be descriptive. When we say descriptive, the name should have something to do with the value that it represents. Okay? So for example, we have here a problem. Create a program that will display the sum of two numbers inputted by the user. So that's the problem. You're gonna create a program that will show you the sum of two numbers that will come from the user. So our algorithm for that is the following. So we have four steps. The first step is you need to declare three variables, two for the addends and one for the sum. Okay, and then you will let the user to input the addends. You're gonna input the two numbers, and then after that, you perform the addition between the addends and assign it to the sum. And then finally, you're gonna display the sum. So when you follow these four steps, you'll be able to solve the problem. Okay, which is to display the sum of two numbers inputted by the user. Okay, later on, I'm going to show you how to create a flowchart for this problem. But for now, let's define what is a flowchart. Flowchart is a method that allows a programmer to represent the algorithm in a diagram or an illustration. Flowcharts represent the sequence of programming algorithm by using standard graphic symbols that will represent the input, the process, and the output. Later on, I'm going to show you the basic symbols that are used in creating or designing flowchart. Again, another definition for flowchart. It graphically depicts or shows the logical steps to carry out a task and shows how the steps relate to each other. Okay, you can also express your algorithm using pseudocode. So what do you mean by pseudocode? Pseudocode, it uses English-like phrases with a combination of programming terms to outline the program. Okay? Again, another definition of flowchart. It is a picture or graphical representation of of a problem-solving process. A flowchart gives a step-by-step procedure for a solution of a problem. Okay? So the elements of a flowchart, so you will see later on geographical shape boxes or symbols that represent the steps of your solution. And then the boxes are connected using using directional arrows to show the flow of your solution. Here are the basic symbols. Okay, first we have the ellipse. It represents the start or end. Make sure you indicate whether it is start or end. Okay, and then we have the hexagon symbol. It is used for preparation. Usually we put here the variable declaration, the initialization. Yeah, it goes here. Then we have the rectangle. The rectangle represents the process. So your equation, your formulas will go here. And then we have a parallelogram. Okay, it represents the input or output. Okay, you should indicate whether it is input or output later on. Okay, and then finally we have a diamond symbol for decision making. Okay, and for repetition as well. We're gonna use this diamond symbol later on. So again, for instance, let's go back to this problem a while ago. Create a program that will display the sum of two numbers inputted by the user. Our pseudocode for that will be this. So what happens here is number one, we let num1, so we declare variables. We have num1 equals 0, num2 equals 0, and sum equals 0. And then we get input from the user. So input num1 and num2. And then we have our formula here. Sum equals num1 plus num2. And finally, we display the sum. So how are we going to convert it into flowchart? Okay, I'm going to show you how. So first, I'm going to open my draw.io. Okay, you can open this one. When you open this, it will ask you to create a new diagram or open existing diagram. So I'm gonna start with a new diagram. So create. Okay, this is the interface of the draw.io application. So as I've said a while ago, we should start with the start symbol or the ellipse. Okay, so here it goes. And then I'm gonna double click it. Okay, for me to write start. I'm gonna label it start. Okay, and then after that, I'm gonna use the hexagon symbol. Again, what is the purpose of hexagon? It is used for preparation, right? So I'm gonna declare here inside. I'm gonna declare all the variables that I'm going to use. Okay. I mean, what's this? Okay, I'm gonna connect it using arrows. Okay, that's fine. And then I'm gonna double click it again, and then I'm gonna set all the variables. So in our example, we have num1, num2, and sum. So I'm gonna type here num1. Oops, I'm gonna change the caps lock. So num1 equals 0. I'm gonna use my on-screen keyboard because there's a problem with my keyboard right now. Okay, let's go back here. So num1 equals 0. And then if you have several variables, you use semicolon to separate the variables. So we have num2 again is equal to 0. And then we have our variable sum, which is also equal to 0. Okay? Once you're done with declaring all the variables that you'll be needing, our next step is, what is the next step? Input num1 and num2. So to input num1 and num2, I'm gonna use the parallelogram. Okay, I'm gonna connect it again. This one. And then I'm gonna double click it, and then I'm gonna type the word input. Okay, to distinguish it from output. So what I'm gonna input, I'm gonna use the variable num1 and num2. Okay, once you're done in inputting the numbers or the variables, yeah, the value for that variables. So our next step is process. So what is the symbol for process? It's the rectangle symbol. Okay, so I'm gonna write here our equation. So we have here num1 plus num2, right? I'm gonna stretch this out. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna move it down, somewhere down. Right. And then finally, when you have completed the process, our next step is I'm gonna display what? The output. So our shape for that or symbol for that is again a parallelogram. So I'm gonna double click this one and I'm gonna write output. And what do we expect? We're gonna output the sum. Okay, are we done? Not yet. So we need to include the end symbol here. Okay, if you have a start symbol, you must have an end symbol. Okay, so I'll just write end. So here it goes. So finally we have our flowchart, this one, for the given problem. Okay, we have a start symbol, and then we initialized all the variables that we're going to use, and then we input num1 and num2. I have a formula, sum equals num1 plus num2, and then finally display the output, and then end. Okay, so this is our flowchart for the given problem. Okay, just creating a program that will display the sum of two numbers inputted by the user. So let's say we have another problem. Creating a program that will display the average of two numbers inputted by the user. Okay, notice pseudocode number 1. Take a look at it. So we have how many variables? So we have 1, 2, 3, 4 variables. Okay, with the addition of the ave. Okay, the ave variable. So I input num1 and num2, compute for the sum. After that, I compute for the average, and then I display the average. So to do that, I'm going to modify this one. Okay, I'm going to include average. So ave is equal to 0. Correct. Okay. And then, after the sum, computing the sum, the next step is I'm gonna compute for the average. Right, so I'm gonna put this one here. I'm gonna adjust first this one. I'm gonna place it somewhere here. I'm gonna move it here. This one, I'm gonna write Ave equals, this is the formula, sum divided by 2. Okay, sum divided by 2. Right. And then after that, I'm just gonna move this one downward. I'm gonna display the, not the sum anymore, but the average. Or I will use the variable ave to be consistent. Okay? So this is our pseudocode for a flowchart for our pseudocode. Okay? After the sum process, I have the average process, and then I display the average. Okay? How about pseudocode number 2? Take a look at it. So we have one, two, three variables, and then I input num1 and num2, and then look at the process. Ave equals num1 plus num2 divided by 2. Then I display Ave. So I'm gonna change this by removing the variable sum over here. I'm gonna delete this one. Okay. And then you input num1, num2. And then for your equation, I'm gonna remove this one. And then I'm gonna write here Ave equals num1, the sum of num1, right? Using the PEMDAS, num1 plus num2, right? Then I'm gonna divide it by 2. Okay, I'm gonna stretch this out a little bit. And then this part, I'm gonna remove this one. I'm gonna adjust this. And then I'm gonna move this up. Okay, and then this one also. Here it goes. Okay, so this is our flow chart. Okay, for pseudocode number 2. So if you notice, we have the same problem, but we have two possible pseudocode, right? So your flowchart will depend on the pseudocode that you generated. Okay, so it's okay if you have different solution, different flowchart, as long as when I trace it, when I follow the step-by-step procedures, you will obtain the same result. Okay, next we have another problem, and our problem is create a program that will display even or odd depending on the number inputted by the user. And for instance, this is a pseudocode. We let num equals 0. You input num, and then you check if the num is even. If the num is even, you will output even. If the num is odd number, you will output odd. So to do that, I'm gonna use, I'm gonna first delete this one. Okay, so I'm gonna declare the variable num equals 0. Okay, I'm gonna write here num equals 0. So num equals 0. And then after that, I'm gonna evaluate if it is odd or even number. So I'm gonna use the diamond symbol. Okay, I'm gonna move it up here. It goes. And in the diamond symbol, you're gonna write a question. Okay, that is answerable with a yes or no. Okay, so I'm gonna place here is num even with a question mark. Okay, if it is even, so what will happen is it's gonna display even. If it's odd, it will display odd, right? So I'm gonna place a label for this flow line. Okay, I'm gonna copy this one in here. Okay, for this one, I'm gonna write yes, and for this one, I'm gonna write no. Okay, if the answer to this question is yes, what will be displayed? It will output. So I'm gonna write here display. What will I display? I'm gonna display even. If it's an odd number, okay, I'll just copy this one, and then I'm gonna change the word inside to odd. Okay, and then finally, I'm gonna move it a little. And this one also. Okay, I'm gonna use the and symbol here. I'm gonna connect these two parallelograms. Okay, this one as well. I'm gonna connect it here. Okay, here it goes. And then this one, I'm gonna just move it somewhere here and then connect it here. Right. So now we have our flowchart. Okay. So the output will depend on the input. If it is an even number, it will display even. If it is an odd number, it will display odd. Okay. Now for my last example, let's try this one. Create a flowchart for computing the factorial of a number. So for example, you're going to input a number, and then you're going to compute and display for the factorial of a number. Let's say 5 factorial is equal to 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, right? So I prepared a pseudocode for that. Okay, let's try to make a flowchart for our pseudocode, right? So let's start with declaring three variables, num, ans, and counter. Okay, so we have here num with the value of 0. Take note of the values, right? Take note, okay? So ans is equal to 1, and then we have a counter variable which is equal to 0. Okay, after that, I'm going to input a number. So input num. And then I have three processes here. So counter is equal to num. Okay, so I'm just going to remove this one. Okay, all right. So after this one, I'm going to input. So the symbol for input is parallelogram, right? Okay, so where's my, here it goes. This is a parallelogram. I'm gonna input. I'm gonna write the word input. Okay, so input now. Once you're done with the input, I'm gonna do these processes. I have three processes, so I should have three rectangles. Okay, so the first process is counter is equal to now. Okay, all I need to do is just connect this one, and then the next process, answer is equal to ans times counter. So I'm gonna change this one, ans equals ans multiplied by counter, and then after that, I'm gonna do another process, which is to deduct 1 from now. Num equals num minus 1. Okay, and then once we're done with this one, I'm gonna check if your counter is greater than 0. I mean, it's less than 1. Okay, so if it's less than 1, so we have here this one. I'm gonna check if is this is counter less than 1. If the answer is yes, something will happen. If the answer is no, something will happen. Okay, so I'm gonna place it here, a label, and another label for this one. Okay, if the answer is yes, this is yes, for example. So this is no, this one is yes. If yes, I'm gonna display the answer, right? So I'm gonna display the factorial. So I'm gonna type here display ans. Okay, but if it's no, I will go back to what step? This one. Ans equals ans times counter. Okay, I'm gonna move it somewhere here. Okay, and then this one I'm gonna connect it with the end symbol. Okay, so I just move it somewhere here. Think we're almost done. If it's greater than, if it's less than 1, you stop the program. If it's not, you keep on doing this process. Okay, so here is the final flowchart. Gonna make it a little smaller. Okay, right, this one. So we have a start symbol. We declare all the variables that we need. You input a num, and then you do these processes. Then you have here a condition. If it's less than 1, if yes, display the answer, and then end. If no, keep on repeating this part. And that's it. If you follow this flowchart, you will solve the given problem. Okay? Computing the factorial of a number. Right? So that will be all. Thank you for watching.